Hi everyone, in today's video we are going to do some meal prep for 3 meals this week, 3 dinners. I'm going to do almost complete meals for these 3 days, and not only am I going to meal prep these, but these are also going to be 3 recipes that are going to be stacked together, so something that we call meal stacking. If this is your first video here, my name is Ashley and welcome to my kitchen. So when I chose these 3 meals, I wanted to find things that would make my life easier. Making homemade food involves some thought, planning, and then actually making the food. But there's a lot of things that we can do to make that process easier, and meal stacking is one way to do that. Meal stacking is basically making a meal plan where recipes are working together. If your first meal is going to contain chicken, you'll just make extra to use for these other things. And it's not rocket science, it's simple in and of itself, but with just a little bit of planning, it can make things so much easier. So the 3 meals that I've chosen to do, the first meal will be just a pretty simple meatloaf. We're going to bake potatoes to go with it, have some roasted cauliflower, and then a fresh salad from some of our garden produce. I'm going to make extra baked potatoes and use them on what's called a Cowboy Casserole. And the Cowboy Casserole is sort of, if you ever had tater tot hot dish where you make sort of like a veggie meat mixture and then you top it with tater tots, it's sort of a similar idea, but I'm actually gonna not use tater tots. I'm gonna use sliced baked potato because I feel like that would probably be a better option than basically reshaped french fries. And then the third meal is going to be a pan roasted cauliflower soup. So we're going to roast extra cauliflower that we'll use in our first meal to blend up into that soup. The Cowboy Casserole and the cauliflower soup, both those recipes that I found call for some bacon. Not a lot, neither one of them call for very much. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to do that this week. So I got some bacon, I'll make it all up. And if we don't use it in those 2 recipes, we'll just put it in the freezer to top, something else in a small amount in the future. So with these 3 recipes, there's lots of crossover ingredients that's going to make the effort that I'm putting in the kitchen much more efficient. So the first thing I'm going to do is get the bacon baking, the cauliflower roasting, and then once that's going, I'm going to mix up my meatloaf because we're going to have 2 rounds in the oven. Once those first things come out, we'll bake the meatloaf and bake the potatoes. Okay, so I got my cauliflower here. I've got my bacon here, and this comes from a pork grower near us, and they do all pasture-raised pork, and it is phenomenal bacon. I feel like especially if you're a fan of bacon, you've got to get on like those really high quality meats. So I got my oven preheated, and I don't have any tin foil right now, which is fine. So I'm just going to bake this right on the sheet. All right, so I'm going to put this in. Now for the roasted cauliflower, the recipe text says to pan fry it, but I'm obviously not going to do that. That seems like a lot of extra time and steps, and that's not something that I want to sit here and do. Because the time that this will be roasting in the oven is time that I can use to do other things. This is great for broth, by the way. These leaves and stems are edible, and I often save them for broth. I did a grocery pickup. I don't often do those anymore, but I did one last night, and I got this cauliflower in both heads. We're looking a little funky. This one looks worse. I think this is the worst one. Okay, we got all this chopped up. That is 2 full heads. If you're the kind of person that doesn't like to eat like more of the stemmy parts of this, this is a great way to use some of that up. I will make sure that those more stemmy pieces get blended up for the soup, and not as a part of our just regular eating portion. Now I'm just gonna do really simple for this, just some olive oil and some salt. My kids just devour any well-roasted veggies. All right, now these are gonna join the bacon. One thing I just realized as I was not putting aluminum foil on my baking pan for bacon, I don't have aluminum foil for baked potatoes, but that's okay. I have done it. I have baked potatoes without using tin foil, and it'll be just fine. I'll probably just put them on a pan instead so that any kind of liquid that might come out won't fall on the bottom of my oven. It will just kind of stay where it is. All right, so now we're gonna get the meatloaf mixed up. So another part that makes this series of meals a stack is that it has beef in 2 of the different recipes. And even though the beef used in these recipes, one is gonna be used for a meatloaf and one is gonna be used sort of browned, that's okay. The idea is that it's simplifying by grouping ingredients. Instead of just taking out a smaller amount of hamburger for something, I can just grab 3 and I know I'm gonna use it for multiple recipes. And that's the same idea, is it simplifies everything. It simplifies your shopping, which is a big thing, your shopping list. You're not running all over the store for all these ingredients. And then if I wanna try something that's a little bit more unique, I can try to find recipes that use those ingredients anyway, so I'm not going and getting a super long list of random ingredients that I'm not really gonna use for anything else, unless I plan for it. So let's get this meatloaf mixed up now. And our meat comes from the farm. I mean a butcher, but basically from the farm. So it doesn't have any of those liquid absorber pads. So that's what the liquid is in the bowl. It's just the same stuff that comes from any other meat. It just is not getting soaked up by that extra packaging. So I always make sure I put it in a bowl when it's thawing and it catches it. And then I'll just get my 3rd pound of meat. As long as I'm handling meat, I'll just get it in my pan. I can link, I did another meal stacking video. I've only done one other one. And I kind of go and explain what meal stacking is, and I go through a very specific recipe stack, and anyway, those recipes are free on our website. I don't usually talk about it because it's not the only meal planning that I use, and I feel like it's a great idea to incorporate in just general meal planning, but I certainly don't use it all the time. But when I can, I do, because it makes a lot of sense and it keeps things simple. And right now, I'm really needing simple. So that's why I'm doing it again. And anyway, you'll see changes on the website. I also have a link for some of the recipes that I just do in some of my other videos. I have a link on the site for those. But you'll see things change and evolve and whatnot if you do check out the website. I just have my meat in my pan. I'm gonna put it on sort of like a medium-high heat. I might throw a little bit of olive oil in here. I'll just kind of see how this goes. This meat is organic, grass-fed. I mean, it checks literally all the boxes you would want beef to check, which means it's very lean naturally. And of course, the fat that's in there is very rich in lots of omegas and all kinds of other things because of the rich grass diet that they eat. But it still does need a little help sometimes. Obviously not in the meatloaf because that's going to be baked. But sometimes when I'm sauteing things, I will add a little oil. So I'm just going to saute up this meat and also get some of the spinach going in here as long as it's this far along. I'm going to put in an entire bag of organic spinach. And the other thing that I'm going to do with some of that cauliflower that I'm roasting for the soup and a side to go with the meatloaf is I'm going to substitute in some cauliflower for corn. Whenever I buy corn, I never find it in a 1 cup increment, whether it's in a can or in a bag, frozen or anything like that. So substituting out with some more cauliflower to me just makes so much more sense. I never really have a single recipe for meatloaf that I use, and I'm not feeling particularly inspired by any that I'm seeing, so I'm just gonna kind of go for it. I'm going to use some of this homemade garlic salt. And I've used this before, and every time I mention, this is a darker garlic salt. It got a little darker than my garlic salt usually gets, but all I do is just make sure that I use it in a recipe where the garlic isn't going to roast or cook much more. This is going to be mostly incorporated into the meatloaf, so I'm not super concerned about it. I just threw in the rest of the breadcrumbs that I had, in addition to some milk, 1 egg. In addition to that egg, I'm also going to throw in a little bit of flax meal. Obviously I have a ton of it and it'll help bind like an egg, but sort of add a little bit of a different flavor. All right, and I don't want to go too wild with like herbs and stuff, but I absolutely love this rosemary powder. It's so tasty. Little bit of seasoned salt, not too much because of the salt in the garlic powder. And then I have this Worcestershire sauce. If I can open it. All right, this is probably gonna spill, so I will scoop it out. And we'll just do 2 tablespoons. And then besides that, I'm gonna put in a little bit of prepared mustard and just a little bit of tomato ketchup. Ketchup will add a little sweetness too. And my least favorite part is mixing it. The best way to mix, I have found, is use your hands, but I do not like touching raw meat. I'm gonna put it on a flat pan just because I don't have 2 matching loaf pans. So this way it'll cook evenly. Scoop out half and half. And this is obviously going to feed us for more than 1 meal. I'm going to set that aside. Okay, our cauliflower looks to be maybe close here. Oh yeah. That's really nice and soft. I was thinking maybe it was charring, but it wasn't soft, but it's soft. Okay, so we're just gonna set this aside and get our next things going. In fact, actually, I'm gonna get the meatloaf in right now. Lowered the temperature on my oven. Now, as far as potatoes go, I'm trying to gauge, I'm thinking I can probably do, I'm gonna just do 6 and we'll make it work. Now, because these don't have any tin foil, I'm actually gonna just rub a little olive oil on each one and drizzle a little salt. All right, and in these go. Now while that's baking, I can go back to this Cowboy Casserole. I got my bacon all chopped up and in there. So I'm going to just use this dish to mix everything. Right, now I'm gonna just chop up a bunch of this roasted cauliflower to take place of that corn. And I realize this is more than a cup, but that's okay. I felt like throwing more than a cup in. To create some creaminess in this casserole, I'm just mixing up 1 can of cream of mushroom soup with about 3/4 cup of milk. This is gonna go in my freezer because I think that's gonna be, we just have, you know, we have the double meatloafs, we actually have a lot of food here, which is definitely gonna carry us through this week, these 3 extra meals, in addition to some stuff we have in our freezer that I wanna use up and our fridge up here. So this is gonna go in our freezer, but we are gonna use it probably, let's see, today's Saturday, we'll probably use it by Wednesday or Thursday, but I don't want it taking up fridge space and I don't want to risk it going bad, so I'm just gonna throw it in the freezer. But if I was making this tonight for dinner, I might even do all of this part, or even the browning, the mixing in a Dutch oven and bake it in the Dutch oven, because this is gonna bake once this is all done. And then you only have 1 pot that's messy, and you could even mix up the soup and everything right in there with it. Okay, we've got all this cheese on here. I feel like 2 cups was a lot. That's what the recipe called for. This was way less. But I put some cheddar cheese on here. Once this cools down and the potatoes are cooled down, I'll top it with the potatoes. I'll just slice it. You guys, this cauliflower soup is so easy. Just after the roasting portion, this just is like, if you needed dinner in a cinch, get this roasting and then do other things, come back in the kitchen, and within 10 minutes, dinner would be done. All I did was add the cauliflower, broth, milk, some thyme, a little bit of cheddar cheese, and I think I'm gonna go in with a little bit more of my homemade garlic powder. That stuff is so dang good, and obviously it's not gonna get too high and roast, so it'll go perfectly in this. I'm just heating this till all this cheese melts, and then I'm gonna let this boil for just a few minutes, and then I'm gonna put it in my Vitamix. So if you have a blender, a food processor, even if you have a potato masher, you can really break up this cauliflower a lot and make it a lot more of like a creamy, sort of smooth consistency. And so I'm probably gonna throw it in my Vitamix and do that, and I'll be done. Let it cool down. Maybe we'll put it in the freezer, maybe we'll put it in the fridge. Either way, this is gonna get eaten in its entirety this week. Oh, and don't forget, top it with some bacon. Now that my meatloaf has mostly cooked, I'm just going to put a simple glaze with some ketchup and a little bit of barbecue sauce, and then broil it on low just to kind of caramelize that top a little bit. I love this ketchup because there's no sugar added to it, and I think that it tastes just wonderful without. Okay, these baked potatoes are done. I pierced them and they are soft all the way through, which is great. I'm gonna let these cool down now. We're done cooking. Okay, I pulled the meatloaf out. I'm gonna let that cool down a little bit on the pan before I transfer it to the cooling rack. This is cooled down to the point where I would feel comfortable putting it in the freezer, but the potatoes are still quite warm. So I'm gonna just slice these and put them on the top here because they will cool down if they're cut up. And then I'm gonna get that in the freezer. These, we're gonna eat one. I'm gonna freeze the other. Here is the creamy cauliflower cheesy soup. Super, super tasty and a really good balance. Tons of veggies in there. You've got a little calcium going on with the milk and the cheese, and then that really great broth, which is, I mean, it's organic chicken and all kinds of good organic scraps from all the food that I make. Thanks for coming along with me today as I go through and I do some meal prep. This is like a week of food for us. When you factor in other things that we have in our fridge and, like I said, freezer, things that are just easy to grab that I've already prepared, that are already ready to go, that in combination with this food, it's easily gonna last us a week. So I probably won't have to make dinner until this time next week. I have these 2 meatloafs. I'm thinking we'll probably eat one early, maybe tomorrow. And then the next one, we'll wait and kind of use that one last so it spreads that out. But other than that, it's just like pick and choose. And it is absolutely simplifying for us. I'm in a space right now where I really need simplification just based on a lot of other things we have going on. And this is just a great way to do that. I hope that this inspired you to think about ingredients that you use in various meals and grouping them together. Maybe you already do that. If you do and you saw things that I did that you think that, hey, I've done that and this is actually a really good tip or suggestion, please put those in the comments and I'll say hi. If you'd like to see more of what comes out of my kitchen, more food prep, different recipes, food preservation, we've got a lot of great videos coming out that crosses all of those topics. Umami mushroom powder, that one is going to be coming out very soon. I hope you have a wonderful day and we will see you soon.